A major leak of classified U.S. military intelligence has governments around the world scrambling, including here in Canada, where hackers allegedly gained access to critical infrastructure.
Photographs of a trove of classified documents are reportedly circulating online.
More details are emerging about how an apparent trove of intelligence documents leaked onto social media sites over the last few months.
But here's the wild part. The leak didn't come from a journalist or something like WikiLeaks. No, instead, the information was passed out via a chat room on a social media app called Discord. Then the documents, well, they wound up on Russian Telegram channels and even on the notorious internet forum 4chan. And these documents, they contained sensitive security information. They were all classified, either secret or top secret. And they're now all over social media. There's details in these leaks about U.S. involvement in the Ukraine war, analysis of the risks posed by China, and the leaks even reveal U.S. intelligence on a whole whack of countries, including Egypt, Haiti, Hungary, Iran, Israel, South Korea, Turkey, and yes, Canada. Now, CBC has not independently verified these documents, but Reuters is reporting that they are relatively accurate, although some dealing with, Ukrainian casualties and Russian troop sizes do appear to be altered. But for the most part, they are or appear to be authentic. And the issues that they raise are alarming. So to break down some of these key takeaways, what we know and what we don't know, I'm joined by Dan Lamothe. He's with the Washington Post. Hey, Dan.
Hey, good afternoon.
Okay, so let's start off thinking about the scale of this. I know this leak was actually quite large, and it was also leaked in a really strange way. Maybe you could walk us through that.
Sure. We're looking at dozens of pages that appear to be legitimate. They have proliferated across the internet in recent days, and they appear to initially have been uploaded on Discord, a gamer chat app, back in February, possibly even a little bit earlier. And at this point, we're all sort of sorting through what's real but possibly doctored, and whether or not there might be any outright fakes in there as well.
Right. And the scale of this is actually relatively large as well. I mean, when we sort of put this in comparison to other leaks, where does this sort of fit in?
I think this fits in somewhere behind the pack in terms of something like WikiLeaks or the Edward Snowden case. But aside from something that large, I mean, it is the most recent large one that I've seen in some time, certainly probably back to those cases.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to jump into some of these things and break them down part by part, get a couple takeaways from this. So takeaway number one, maybe you can walk us through what this document is telling us about what's happening in Ukraine right now.
Is the White House offering any kind of reassurance to Ukrainian officials about the safety of some of their most sensitive information?
U.S. officials have been in touch with relevant allies and partners over the last couple of days at very high levels, and I'll leave it at that.
Sure. I think the Ukraine documents are probably the most newsy and significant in there. It takes a lot of what have been under discussion, Ukrainian combat capabilities, gaps in those capabilities, what the allies need to do potentially to prop Ukraine up as we continue to move into this second year of fighting. And it kind of lays it bare. It raises red flags about, significant gaps in the Ukrainian air defenses, potentially as they run low on air defense ammunition. And it raises serious concerns about this long discussed counteroffensive or offensive that they want to launch this spring in terms of the feasibility and just how much they'll be able to practically do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and from what I understand, laying bare some of those weaknesses, as you were talking about there, this is something that the Ukrainians are frustrated that this information now is out there more broadly.
Yes, very much so, and you can understand why. And just as we're working through the reporting on this, when I started seeing those slides late last week, initially that raises concerns even as a journalist, where you're kind of wondering how much detail you should be putting out there. The problem becomes because of the way this leaked. It's all over the internet now. It has, spread wildly through Telegram, Twitter, and other places, particularly those key slides.
Yeah.
So the discussion of how to report this continues to evolve.
Okay, so let's move to our next takeaway. Let's focus on Canada here for a second.
One CIA document reportedly refers to a pro-Russian hacking group claiming it has successfully broken into Canada's gas distribution network.
What do we know about this?
We know that there's a document in there that in which U.S. officials assess that Russian hackers have claimed it can access it. U.S. is concerned about the possibility, but obviously we haven't seen anything surface that would appear to back that. That we haven't seen any explosions or anything like that. So you're left wondering where the gap, or communications gap, might be there in terms of what the concern was versus what the reality is.
Yeah, it's a scary situation, though, thinking about that they might hackers might have been able to get into some critical systems. And as you say, there haven't been any explosions, so I guess that's a good takeaway. Moving on, so the next takeaway, China. Of course, these were U.S. security documents that were leaked. What did we learn about the relationship between the U.S. and China from this leak?
I mean, the United States, has for a couple of years now, at minimum, considered China to be its primary adversary, its most significant long-term security concern, its greatest competitor in terms of the way that the Chinese appear to view the world, particularly the senior officials in Beijing. Within these documents, there's a specific concern raised that depending on what Ukraine does, specifically what kinds of attacks Ukraine may launch on Russia, long-range attacks into Russia, that if they were to do so, China may sort of drop its concern at this point in terms of sending lethal aid to Russia. To date, they have not done that, at least not in any kind of way that's surfaced significantly. And that if Ukraine were to basically start launching big attacks into Russia, China may change its mind on that and then provide significant arms to Russia, thus changing sort of the outcome of the war.
Okay, looking at our last takeaway here, spying. I know this isn't the first time that we've seen that the U.S. is spying on everyone in the world, but it's not only their adversaries, it's also their allies.
The scope of the data leak is global, reportedly showing that the U.S. spies on allies like South Korea and Israel.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the impact that potentially has going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think a very good example that has created some headlines already is there's a slide in there in which South Korea's concerns in terms of providing ammunition that might be used in Ukraine comes up, and the thought was that the South Koreans didn't want any lethal aid that they may send to be tied back to them, that they didn't want sort of the inconvenient or challenging nature of them dealing with their own regional partners that way. So the idea was if they could send, howitzer rounds, artillery rounds to Poland, perhaps that could backfill somehow rather than just sending them straight to Ukraine the way that Canada, the United States, and others have. South Korea is very specifically and pointedly saying that they believe this document to be altered or a fake, and now we're left wondering whether or not they are trying to portray it as such, or whether it really is a fake. The assessment from our reporting is that document was real.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of scrambling that's happening across the board right now. I'm curious what happens next. These are such important documents. You imagine that there's going to be some investigation trying to find who leaked them. What happens next here?
There's a couple things that are all kind of happening in sequence here. For one, we heard, the story initially broke with just a handful of documents Thursday night in the New York Times. By Friday, we now know that the Pentagon began ratcheting down who has access to these documents. These are slides that were largely prepared for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, but as long as you had the clearance, you could look at them. So they spread beyond that. Hundreds, maybe even thousands had access to these documents. They have curtailed that. There's a much smaller universe of people that now can see these things. But they've also launched an investigation to try to figure out what happened, who's responsible. There's both a criminal investigation here by the Department of Justice and a Pentagon investigation in terms of the damage it may cause and how to go about making sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we really appreciate you taking time to come chat with us here, Dan. We'll have to watch what happens next. Thanks so much.
Thank you.